Part 2 of my Mini Rig 3 overview and all the ways you can use it. Did finish my Part 1 Mini Rig 3 overview by saying dramatic loss of bass as you go through the volume scale from about halfway up, cutting bass quite dramatically. So the question was left, well, what happens when you add your subwoofer? It's £139 retail for your Mini Rig 3, £129 retail for your subwoofer. Basically doubling the price if you add the sub. Is it really worth it? If you buy it as a 1.1 bundle, by the way, you will get £10 or £9.95 off on the Mini Rig website. So you will have to connect them by analog cable. Subwoofer is not Bluetooth. So on the subwoofer, you of course have your high gain, low gain ports, just like on the Mini Rigs themselves, with the charging port in the middle. So high gain always nearest the grill, low gain the other side. It's off. If I connect a cable, it will immediately come on. I have to connect via the cable to my Mini Rig 3. It does make that noise as it's connected. You also notice as I input my cable, this Mini Rig 3 also comes straight on. So it's still pretty portable, even though that's not Bluetooth, because it only has to be connected to the Mini Rig itself. Just to say, there is some confusion. Does the subwoofer still match the Mini Rig 3? Because 15 watts the subwoofer, 15 watts the Mini Rig 2. So it was pretty much obvious that one sub matched one Mini Rig 2. However, having said that, they don't sell a 2.2 bundle. If you go on and look at all the bundles, 2.0, it's 2.1, it's 1.1. You would think one sub matched two Mini Rig speakers. It's not the case. If you buy a 2.1 system with a Mini Rig 2 or a Mini Rig 3 and you go in the app to have them play in a balanced way, it will reduce the maximum output on the Mini Rig 2 or Mini Rig 3 themselves to match the maximum output of the sub. One sub matches one Mini Rig 2. That's still the case with the Mini Rig 3. And even though that's a 40 watt speaker and that's a 15 watt speaker, because they work in different ways with the subwoofer, it's still a matched system. So whereas the Mini Rig 2 cuts its own bass from like 200 hertz down and lets the subwoofer do all the bass work all through the volume scale, the Mini Rig 3 does not cut its own bass. And it cuts its bass as you go through the volume scale, but not in relation to the sub. So that as soon as you plug in a cable, whether it's attached to a subwoofer or not, into the Mini Rig 2, it cuts bass, just for the fact that it's got a cable connected to it. That's not the case now with the Mini Rig 3. It does its own thing with its bass, and it's totally independent of whether you add a subwoofer or a cable of any sort. So it's really like a fill-in bass with the Mini Rig 3, whereas it's all the bass with the Mini Rig 2, and that's why it still matches the Mini Rig 3. And obviously that's what I will demonstrate in this video, that one subwoofer does play well with a Mini Rig 3. The question is it worth it to you to double your investment or to choose that over a 2.0 system? Well, I'm going to go into a 2.0 system in another video. I will say, people are coming in the comments and saying, yeah, but that's because you're meant to listen to it face up, that it's meant to be firing face up. There is this thing going around where people are telling each other they've designed it with a boosted high end because they intend you to listen off axis for the 360 degree sound. And I directly asked this of Mini Rig, has it been designed that way? They said, when I first asked them in the support, no, you listen how you want. We haven't tuned it to suit any particular listening. Now, someone else in Mini Rig may tell me something completely different. I have to just say, pointing out, there's nothing from Mini Rig themselves that I can find stating that. But there is this thing going around. So before anyone else puts in the comments, say, I am aware that if you listen to it in a different angle or a different way, it's going to change the nature of sound. Of course, I have recorded everything on axis to this point. I've covered in my first Mini Rig 2 overview, the difference between on axis and off axis. I recognise that's one of the main ways you're going to listen to it. And so I went through how that changes the sound. Of course, you're going to lose some of that treble and it's going to sound a little bit smoother listening like that. I am recording everything on axis for now to get a hand on exactly what the speaker itself is doing so I can give an exact idea of the differences between the Mini Rig 2 and the Mini Rig 3. Of course, if I put it against the wall or I have it that way up and it's now got, the bass is now on a solid area, it's going to help the bass. I'm aware that you can change the sound by doing all sorts of things, as you can with any other speaker. I've got the Extreme 2 out because I'm going to be comparing it with the Extreme 2. I think it's even more relevant now because if you add a subwoofer, it's about the same cost as an Extreme 2. And already a Mini Rig 3 went a bit louder in terms of absolute peaks and average sound than the Extreme 2. It's just that it doesn't have the bass of the Extreme 2. So just putting it out there that carry on this debate about is it tuned to be listened off axis? So is it a bit of a nonsense? I'm recording everything on axis and saying it's a bit sharp in the high end. I don't think it is, because I do listen on axis, especially when I'm listening in stereo. But of course, everyone will listen in a different way. You should be aware I am recording on axis, and if you listen to it face up, you won't get all of that treble. It's going to help smooth it out a little bit. Also be aware though, Mini Rig have never said that. I cannot find any quote where the Mini Rig has said they've tuned it that way, and I've asked them directly, have you tuned it that way? They said no. I've now emailed them to try and clarify once and for all. Have you tuned it that way because you expect people to listen to it like that? And should I just make all my recordings like that and not bother telling people what it sounds like? If you have it face on, which some people will listen to that way, especially if you have a 2.0 or 2.1 or 2.2 system, face on for best stereo imaging. I just want to say, I've heard back from Mini Rig. For the second time they've said, we have tuned the Mini Rig to take account of both on-axis and off-axis listening. It's not tuned to favour upward firing 360-degree listening. So, can we put that one to bed? Thank you. So, quickly, the subwoofer itself is less than a kilo. It's pretty light. It's 800 odd grams. They market it as the world's smallest subwoofer. It's not Bluetooth. You do have to connect by cable. It does come with 4 little plastic feet built on. I wish they would do that with the Mini Rig. You wouldn't have to buy dedicated stands to have it playing front on. But if we had 4 built-in feet like that, just to me, it's really frustrating how much easier it would be just to stop it rolling. At the moment, you've got to rely on it catching the edge there. And that seems the most effective way to have it on the right-hand side to stop it rolling. It's rated at 48 Hertz to 150 Hertz. But basically, it seems to fill in bass from about 200 Hertz down, and how it fills in the bass will depend on if you're using a Mark II or a Mark III, because the Mark II will cut its own bass and rely totally on the subwoofer for bass, whereas the Mini Rig 3 will not cut its bass in any way in response to the subwoofer. So the subwoofer will be filling bass, and it'll be different wherever you are in the volume scale. 10 hours battery life, maximum volume, 40 hours mixed use, 80 hours low volume is what they rate it at. Yes, you can use all these Mini Rigs all day long. It'll keep playing 9 hours, 10 hours, maximum volume with the subwoofer. The downside is the slow to charge. It's going to take another 10 hours to charge it. So if you don't put it on charge that night, you won't be able to use it the next day. It's going to take all day to charge. It is faster charge now, 5 hours now for the Mini Rig 3, but it's still only 900 milliamps to charge the subwoofer. So I left that last video. It's dramatically reducing bass as you got the volume scale. The question is, well, is it worth paying that money for a sub? Would it really make much difference to the Mini Rig 3, given that it's only 15 watts and my Mini Rig 3 is 40 watts? So this clip answers that question. So the question was, Does the sub that went with the Mini Rig 2 make much of a difference when you add it to the Mini Rig 3? Does it help with the dramatic bass reduction on a single Mini Rig 3 as you got the volume scale? So the sweet point was around halfway, about 46%, a single Mini Rig 3. So even at the sweet point doesn't make any difference if you add the sub, which on paper is underpowered at 15 watts compared to the 40 watts of the Mini Rig 3. And the answer is pretty clear. Yes, it adds about 3 decibels from about 100 hertz down. It's taking the peak that was 75 hertz, about minus 23 decibels. It's now going to about 60 hertz, maybe just a bit above 60 hertz, about minus 20. Even at about 50 hertz, it's still about 3 decibels stronger when you add the sub without affecting the rest of the sound. So you're kind of getting something free for nothing. Not free, you bought the sub, but you're just getting more bass. And it's pretty well balanced. It's adding about 3 decibels. It's sounding a bit more realistic, warmer, fuller. That 50 hertz mark. On a single Mini Rig, around 29, 50 hertz, around minus 26. It's deeper, it's fuller, even at its sweet point. So, what happens when you go to maximum volume? Single Mini Rig. From about 300 hertz down, it's dramatically cutting bass. From about 200 hertz down, 150 hertz down, it's basically gone. It's a completely different listen at maximum volume, and considering you're buying it, you know, if you already had a Mini Rig 2, because it's going to go that much louder, you're probably going to play it at much louder volumes, nearer the 100%. You're losing too much bass really for that still to be a pleasant listen. Going to get a bit tinny, a bit harsh, a bit tiring. Does it still only add 3 decibels, which still wouldn't make much of a difference? Well, no, it's making a huge difference. And in fact, the deeper you go, the more of an increase you're getting over a single one with no sub. So it's still not recovering fully the bass, but don't forget, it's a 15 watt sub, a 40 watt speaker. This is at maximum volume. It's enough of a difference to go from, well, I can't really listen to that, to, yeah, that's not a bad listen. So 100 hertz, minus 36. It's now about minus 30. It's added 3 decibels. 75 hertz. We're now at around 29. We were about 40. We're talking about 10 decibels now, stronger at 75 hertz. 50 hertz. It was about 48, 47. We're now about 31 decibels. About 17 decibels louder. So it's a huge difference. If you're going to listen at maximum volumes, it's a no-brainer. You've got to get it with the sub. So yeah, it makes a huge difference. Given the problems of stereo pairing, and you're still not going to get the bass as you got the volume scale, to me, it makes more sense. That's my view at this point. Without more listening, it makes more sense to get a 1.1 than a 2.0. If I had to start again from scratch, subwoofer makes a huge difference to the Mini Rig 3. It's still a bit sharp for me, but obviously it makes it feel a bit warmer because it's a fuller, rounder bass. So now we know that. Some comparisons with the subwoofer, the Mark III, with the subwoofer, the Mark II, and against the Extreme. Why? Well, because it's, you know, it's a bassy speaker. It's something that people are going to have a handle on, and it's about the same price as a 1.1. It is stereo. This is still mono and 1.1. But just to give you a handle where we are and how much of a difference has this made adding the subwoofer, this is my comparison clips, just showing you differences between the different setups now.
of your over that I know you can't afford, like the tattoo on your shoulder. I know it breaks your heart, moving to a city in a broke down car. And 4 years, no cars, now you're looking pretty in a hotel bar. And I can't stop. No, I can't stop. So baby, pull me close up in the backseat of your Rover that I know you can't afford, like the tattoo on your shoulder. I know it breaks your heart, moving to a city in a broke down car. And 4 years, no cars, now you're looking pretty in a hotel bar. And I can't stop. No, I can't stop. So baby, pull me close up in the backseat of your Rover that I know you can't afford, like the tattoo on your shoulder. I know it breaks your heart, moving to a city in a broke down car. And 4 years, no cars, now you're looking pretty in a hotel bar. And I can't stop. No, I can't stop. So baby, pull me close up in the backseat of your Rover that I know you can't afford, like the tattoo on your shoulder.
The Mini Rig 3 on its own, no sub, playing at about 73% volume, trying to match sound pressure levels approximately. With the sub, it was at about 60% volume. That's the difference. When you add a sub, when you haven't got a sub, it goes that much louder. And as you can see in the bass, about 3 decibels more bass. And it's starting to increase bass from about 200 hertz and down, and at between 50 to 70 hertz around this area. That's where you get another 3 decibels louder, more bass. It's a bigger bass, it's a fuller bass. It makes a big difference to the sound. It's still a sharpish sound. It obviously is not affecting the high end, but it's filling out the bass, it's making it a bit warmer. Basically, it's a huge deal when you add 15 watt subwoofer to the Mini Rig 3. Even though it was originally designed to go with the Mini Rig 2, they have designed the Mini Rig 3 to work in tandem with that subwoofer. So compared to the Mini Rig 2 with a sub, I've had to play it a little bit louder for a start. Obviously the Mini Rig 2 does not go as loud as the Mini Rig 3. And the first thing you can see is it's not quite as full in the bass. The Mini Rig 3 with a sub is a fuller bass. It's also a louder bass at 60 hertz with the Mini Rig and the sub. It's about 21 decibels, minus 21 decibels. You can see it's peaking around 1 decibel higher, but it's also fuller. Although weirdly, there's a little bit less of a roll-off with the Mini Rig 2 and the sub. At 40 hertz, 42 decibels, the Mini Rig 3, it's like 36 decibels, minus 36 decibels with the sub on the Mini Rig 2. But I think you can hear the Mini Rig 3 and the sub against the Mini Rig 2 sub. It's a bigger bass on the Mini Rig 3. Just for reference purposes, against the Extreme 2, it still has a bigger bass on the Extreme 2, by a couple of decibels. But it's all about that bass. It's a thinner bass. It's got a bigger bass line, but it's thinner. It's not as full as the Mini Rig 3 with the sub. It's about the same price, the Extreme 2 and a Mini Rig 3 plus a sub. But the Mini Rig 3 and the sub goes louder overall. As you can see, I've had to play the Extreme 2 about 73% volume to match the average loudness of the Mini Rig 3 and sub, which was playing about 60% volume. So for me, it's a different listen. Adding the subwoofer, it doesn't change, you know, the high end, which is still there, but it's more balanced when you add that sub. So for me, it's a 1.1 rather than a 2.0. However, 2.2 sounds good. Obviously, it's a big old bass. It's a massive bass. It takes it to another level. The main problem I think with the Mini Rig 3 is for a speaker that's, you know, on paper going to go loud, that the amount of bass reduction from 50% onwards is quite hefty to me. Adding the sub, to me, again, is a no-brainer. They do complement each other, and it almost seems a necessity to me. If you're listening 50% onwards, under 50%, yeah, there's still a good amount of bass in the Mini Rig 3. But if you've got a Mark II and you're going to listen to the Mini Rig 3 under 50%, I don't know why you'd upgrade to a Mini Rig 3 anyway. And as I'm trying to really compare Mini Rig 2 and Mini Rig 3, I'm just pointing out that add a sub, yes, because I'm imagining you're not going to be playing less than 50% if you've already got a Mini Rig 2. If you haven't got a Mini Rig 2, well, it sounds great. It's a very dynamic system, 1.1, albeit it's not stereo. It sounds great, as you can hear, compared to the Extreme 2, where, you know, you've got a lot of bass, but not a lot else. It doesn't really handle the actual music itself that well, whereas the Mini Rig 2 does. You can delve into the music in a way you can't with Extreme. I covered most things there, I think, in what's going to happen if you add the sub and is it worth it. The only question is, how loud does it go now? So it goes pretty loud. Playing at maximum volume, adding a subwoofer to the Mini Rig 3, you're basically getting another 3 decibels louder. That's like doubling the power. So you're adding 15 watts, but on paper it's like going to 80 watts. 3 decibels is what you'd expect if you double your power. So 3 decibels is big. It's a big improvement. It's more than you probably would have expected for your 15 watt subwoofer. That's what I'm saying. To me, it's almost a no-brainer. Go 1.0 before your 2.0. It's a different listening experience. It's the bass that really provides some of the satisfying elements of your music, which you're going to lose if you don't have a sub and you're going over 50%. The Mini Rig 3, even without the sub, it's neck and neck with Extreme 2. The difference is one is a very bassy sound and the other one is like a mid-high sound. So although on paper the decibels levels are even average decibels across the track or just the peaks, they're about the same between them. It's just the nature of the sound is very different. It's a more satisfying sound, I've got to say, when you go to higher volumes without the sub, if you're just comparing a Mini Rig 3 on its own with the Extreme 2. Because it's hard to listen to a speaker, you know, a modern speaker, when we're used to getting some decent amount of bass now from very small speakers. It's quite amazing where we are. However, when you lose that bass, it's hard not to just be thinking about how much bass is missing, which you're not going to be thinking about with Extreme 2, even at maximum volume. However, there's not much clarity, there's not much else going on, kind of compressed sound. So it's a different sound. I just think it's more satisfying at maximum volumes with Extreme 2. I just put it in there because A, people have a handle on it, and B, because it's about the same price as going to a 1.1. So yeah, after all that, the basic conclusion is it makes a big difference adding the sub. It's a different listening experience, 50% onwards. 50% under, maybe not so much, because it's filling in bass where it needs to. So as it dramatically reduces bass over 50% volume, the sub is having more and more of an impact. Still doesn't make up for complete loss of bass at the highest volumes. So it still can't match the bass of an Extreme 2, and those sort of speakers, it's a more refined listen, even though it doesn't have all the bass at the highest levels. It's clearer because it's tuned that way. I'm still thinking it's a bit sharp for me, and I'm going to cover this listening off axis. For me, I am listening on axis when I listen, and I'm trying to give you what the speaker itself is actually doing without helping it in other ways by, I could face it that way and really reduce the treble. What would be the point? So yeah, more videos coming up addressing 2.0, 2.1, 2.2 over a period of time. It's going to take a period of time. There's a lot to cover and I want to do the speaker justice. So thank you for watching.
UK